name is Pascale Theron, and I was born and raised in Johannesburg, but I moved to the Netherlands in 2013 to start my studies at the Design Academy in Eindhoven. I live and work in Eindhoven now as well, but I go back and forth between here and South Africa a lot. And I'm actually currently calling you from my small little Eindhoven studio. So hopefully after this we can do it doesn't take very long to do a tour of my studio. It's just a 360, but I'll show you a bit around. Oops. I've always been a creative person, and I was lucky enough to grow up in a very creative home, filled with lots of nature and animals, which was a sort of constant form of inspiration for me. From a young age, I had a particular interest in birds, as you can see from these photographs. A couple of years later, then I decided that I wanted to focus on birds for my future as a designer. So it's an honor for me to actually be sharing my crazy ideas with all of you on your very special anniversary today. This is a quote that I sort of draw a lot of inspiration from, and I often look back at it. Craft connects us to what it means to be human, to make something with your hands, and to know that you exist and see the impact of that existence has enormous value. I usually draw inspiration from my own memories, knowledge, and experiences. Going into a community, talking to locals, speaking to professionals, and just being curious and seeing where each lead takes me. I trust my intuition a lot within all the decisions that I make within my design process, but it always starts from an obsession. Feathered Fabrics was one of my graduation projects that I created for my final year at the Design Academy. The Feathered Fabrics project was a culmination of all my loves: nature, feathers, and South Africa. The feathered fabrics are a series of hand-woven textiles that use natural ostrich feathers as the thread. So starting from the beginning, we have to ask, where did this ostrich feather industry start? The ostrich feather was once a highly valued commodity during the 19th century, as Victorian and Edwardian women sought out big plumes to decorate their flamboyant hats. It was more commonly known as the feather trade. We used to transport tons of these feathers via ships to from South Africa to Europe for fashionable purposes only. Ostrich feathers back then were worth more than their own weight in gold. This was actually until the motor car came out and the poor damsels were losing their bonnets in the wind. Something so trivial almost nearly annihilated the entire ostrich farming industry, leaving many farmers with barns full of feathers that no one really wanted anymore. And since then, the feather has really fallen from grace in terms of its main use being mostly for removing dust and bright carnival costumes. Today, ostrich products are still one of the top 4 exports of South Africa, after gold, diamonds, and wool. But the value really comes in the hides, actually, not the feathers really anymore. So through this project, I aim to enhance the value of the ostrich feather, which is a very specialized product coming from this 150-year-old ostrich feather industry in Oudtshoorn in the Western Cape. I hope to go beyond the aesthetic and decorative and rather return it to its former glory in a more integrated and practical way within a modern society where big feathered hats are no longer stylish. This project was a lot of trial and error, love and tears, sweat and blood. But there was a stage within the project where I was sitting with my mentor, Andrea Trimarchi from Forma Fantasma, where he basically gave me an ultimatum. At this point, I was experimenting with the feathers, and I just struggled to break this image of this iconic ostrich feather that was so well known throughout history. So somehow to overcome this, all the project would basically be scrapped. This motivated me even more to succeed. So in the end, the only way to break up this image of this iconic feather was to literally break up the feather and reconstruct it into something new. By removing the hard central shaft and using the soft thread-like barbules, the feathers can be combined to make a yarn that I then weave into a fabric. Each feather is different, so it's like a fingerprint. This is something that I also use to my benefit when I'm making my feathered fabrics. It also makes each and every piece that I weave unique also. I use the barbules in a variety of ways, playing with the natural tones, the fluffiness, and the length of the feathers. Only the natural uncolored feathers are chosen, as they would be found on the bird. The male ostriches are black and white, and the females tend to be grey. Recently, I've also been playing with color and dyeing the feathers for various projects and experiments. Currently in the worldwide ostrich farming industry, the animal's main purpose is to be slaughtered after only 1 year for their nutrient-rich meat and strong leather, which is worth a whole lot more than the feathers. By personally spending time in Oudtshoorns and talking to farmers and locals, the issue was really clear to me that there was a need for change within the ostrich farming industry, as more and more of our farmers are actually selling their birds off because the demand for ostrich meat and leather has declined so much in the past couple years. This is actually an image that I took while I visited the factory, the feather factory in Oudtshoorn, and this is how they dry the feathers on the floor of the factory. Introducing an alternative industry where the ostriches are only kept for their feathers could mean that the ostriches could live their full lifespan while providing feathers without deterioration in quality for up to 40 years. Collecting those feathers from the ostrich is also the removal of dead material, and it's equivalent to you cutting your fingernails or going for a haircut. So it causes no pain to the bird. This is often a question I get a lot, but the feathers grow back again after 6 months. Ostriches are also one of the easiest and environmentally friendly animals to farm. Unlike other livestock, the ostrich birds are actually native to the Karoo land in South Africa, living in the deserts happily. They produce very little waste and eat very little grain, and that which they do eat is not harmful either because it's grown in nearby towns, unlike the sheep and beef industries. The breathable, washable, soft, warm, and incredibly lightweight qualities of the feathered fabrics mean it can be used in a variety of different and practical ways, such as a functional interior textile, like this room divider that I made for last year's Dutch Design Week, where I used the feathered fabrics as an interior furniture piece and a textural artwork. I worked with Gallery Ashok, who's an artisan that specializes in Japanese woodworking, who lives in Amsterdam. The California yellow cedar frame mimics how the fabric would look if it were stretched on a loom. So the wooden pieces lock together using dovetail joints, and the fabric actually keeps the whole thing together by using its tension, the fabric's tension. So no glue or nails are used actually, and the fabric can be tightened further to get more tension if you want. The other option is using feathered fabrics as a new fashion statement. So as mentioned before, I did this collaboration with Vivio Studio. Vivio Studio is a concept clothing brand from Johannesburg that creates numbered and limited edition fashion pieces. We worked collectively to create a few garments for her collection using my feathered fabrics. It was revealed in the form of feathered pieces, which were completely hand-woven into natural cottons and linens by a local weaver by the name of Madeleine Anderson, who's actually also a member of the Pretoria Weavers Guild. The process of weaving all the fabrics by hand meant that nothing was really wasted when we created the garments. The idea was to really integrate the weaving process and the cutting process by weaving the pieces that fit almost exactly to that of the patterns of the garments, so nothing was cut off and wasted. Lastly, the feathered fabrics could also be used as a more sustainable, animal-friendly solution to the fur industry, which is something that I'm still currently exploring. Because the ostrich has no oil glands, it actually means that they do not have any waterproof feathers like most birds, and that makes it much more possible to wash it actually. The feathers are actually quite strong, despite what most people think, and by combining those feathers along with the cotton when I'm weaving, it strengthens the feathers and gives them a strong base as well. But is this something really new? Using the feathers within the fabric really differs from the current use of feathers, where they're typically used in combination with another fabric. I use the feathers as a thread to create the fabrics, just like the first persons who looked at the sheep and thought, I'd make yarn from that wool and eventually knit a sweater. So maybe in a couple of years we will look at ostriches and their feathers in the same way, I hope. The way feathers are currently being used is always at a distance from our skin. There's always this layer of fabric between the feather and our skin, like in our duvets, between fabric, or in high-end fashion, where the feathers are always applied as a decoration on top of another fabric. But why do we need this extra layer of fabric when the material itself is so soft, warm, and light on its own? The aim of the project is to really bring the manufacturing back to Oudtshoorn and actually have the feathered fabrics locally produced in the place where it all began, 150 years ago. So I'm currently working really hard to find weaving studios and weavers open to moving with me to get this production back to South Africa. I would love to work with equally minded people from the industry who are just as passionate about sustainability and the beauty of the handmade as I am. I think that's probably includes most of the people on this call today. My plan is to work along with the local ostrich farmers, the feather processing factory, and the weavers to create the best possible product that's proudly South African. By harnessing the qualities of the feathers and creating a new craft through these feathered fabrics, it could not only extend as many animals' lives, but also could create a new industry of economic value to the small town of Oudtshoorn and possibly South Africa. Thank you. Please feel free to contact or follow me if you want more to know more. And of course, you're welcome to also email me if you want to collaborate or whatever. So thank you.